morning. Today I'm going to do my hot topic presentation. I chose policy making in educational technology. So one of the big questions is, why should we invest in technology and its policies? It's a tool that can be utilized to help with those challenges that we find in teaching and learning, those challenges of trying to individualized lessons, trying to teach not to the middle, but to the high and the low. Some other examples are teaching to those that are far away, and especially in rural Oklahoma, some of our students don't have the same opportunities as more urban students as far as what they can take. And so technology in the classroom allows them to be able to have the same opportunities that those in urban environments might have. It helps our students to make sense of complex data when they have to go and analyze a website for its truth. Make sure that what they're reading they understand, and putting it together with other data from other websites, that's a higher level thinking skill. It helps with writing and communication. Most of our writing tests are online now, and being able to write an email is a critical skill, especially in the business world. And then it also broadens their scope and their diversity, as well as the timeliness with which they can obtain that information. So it allows them to learn about other cultures from that culture and not just from a book written by somebody who maybe is not in that culture. Another reason is it's an agent of change. We're seeing this especially in higher education, how we're changing from a less lecture-driven to a more student-oriented classroom, including more constructivism and more inquiry. The classroom is more flexible, so students can work on the assignments when it's convenient for them, and it's more engaging because it's not just somebody up there talking at you. You're actually being able to interact with the information. And then also, it's extremely important for economic competitiveness. You cannot get a job anywhere that doesn't require you to have some sort of knowledge of technology, and not just social media technology, but computers and email and software systems and those kinds of things. One of the articles that I chose said it was critical for economic dominance, for the United States to continue to be economically dominant. It does improve your decision making, and it increases citizen participation. In the next slide, I have you look at the elections since the advent of the internet, and citizen participation is huge. It also enhances the social well-being of the citizenry. They become advocates for their own education, advocates for their own health, advocates for new opportunities economically. You can search and find which university is right for you, whereas before you usually went to the closest college because that's the one that you knew about, and only elite universities were able to advertise as well, so that the whole nation would know who they were. As far as advocating for your own health, it's allowed people to search symptoms, and sometimes that can be bad. Dr. Google's not always the best, but it does allow you to see if there are other health care opportunities out there. So if you look at this chart, you can see that voter turnout since the advent of the internet, which was in the 80s, has steadily increased, with the exception of 1996. I'm not sure why it so drastically reduced in 1996, but at an all-time high in 2008. because citizens can get information that they need about the candidates. Before, especially before the advent of television or radio, you didn't know who the candidate was that you were voting for necessarily, and you'd never seen them other than on a advertisement that uh, they may or may not have had enough money to produce. And now with the advent of social media and blogs and those kinds of things, you can research your candidate from the minute you hear their name. So other considerations as to why we should invest in technology and its policies. Students who leave school without those sufficient literacy skills are less likely to be able to participate in just life in general, being a productive citizen. And those literacy skills not only come from the technology, but also math and reading skills that they need that can be enhanced with technology. We need a framework to be able to provide teachers with guidance about how to help students navigate the internet, how to find fake news, how to look for jobs, how to put their best social media face forward. It also helps to narrow gaps in literacy and math, because even if all the internet were free, there'd still be a gap in digital skills due to the inability to read and do math. So it's not just about, do they have access to technology? It's also about, are we using that technology to help with literacy and math skills? And we want to create policies that decrease the harmful aspects of internet use, like too much screen time, bullying, low self-esteem, those kinds of things. So from the Department of Education, there were 7 key policy recommendations from the article that I read. And the first one was to improve access, connectivity, and requisite infrastructure. Now, when the internet was invented, it was very expensive. Computers were expensive. Lots of schools didn't have computers. But with the increase in technological advances, it's become cheaper and easier to get those things. So it's not just about having that physical access to the hardware and the internet. By now, all public schools have instructional computers with internet access, and the computer ratio is 3.1 to 1, student to computer, and that's for the entire nation. Unfortunately, only about 6% of schools have technologies that students can take home. That means that they're 1-to-1 and able to take it home. This needs to be increased because students don't have necessarily the means, even though it has become cheaper and easier to acquire them. Not all students have the means to acquire that technology. And so that's probably the next big step that we need to take. Most of the computers in schools are older and are desktops. But there's no significant difference between geographical location or type. So it doesn't mean that just because you live in a rural area doesn't mean that you don't have a better computer. Even urban schools have older computers that are desktops. So the second key policy recommendation was they wanted us to create higher quality content and software. So it needs to not only be visually better, but we want to emphasize content and take pedagogy into account. Only 22% of schools have wireless internet access, and that's a higher quality issue. We need them all to have wireless internet access so that students can utilize things like bringing their own technology. Most, if not all, students have some sort of cell phone, and with wireless internet access, they can access curriculum from that. There's many different online curriculums. I know that Epic Charter Schools has over 100 different ones, and since that the advent of those, they've been taking into account that content and pedagogy. And this DOE, the Department of Education retrospective that I was looking at, was from 2003. So this has become a less important policy, but nonetheless, we always need to strive for better content. Another recommendation was to provide sustained and high quality professional development for teachers. It's probably the single most important step towards total technological integration. If teachers don't buy in, they're not going to utilize it in their classroom. If they don't know how to use it, they're going to be scared to use it. I found it interesting that OSU only requires one educational technology type course for their secondary education students, and they don't require any for elementary education. OU does require multiple for both elementary and secondary education. I didn't look further into other schools. I looked at the two majors in Oklahoma, but we need more professional development for new teachers and more professional development for teachers that are already in the classroom. So, according to a survey by the National Education Statistics Council, they found that most public schools believe that their teachers are adequately trained in technology use, but only 69% of these teachers are constructing lessons with integrated technology. So if they're all adequately trained, why aren't they all using technology in their lesson plans? So we've still got a little ways to go. I know when I was teaching in middle school, we had plenty of teachers who were adverse to using technology for their lessons. And so we really have to embrace the variability and customizability of technology. Another recommendation was to increase fundings to schools. We need sustained funding. It doesn't just need to be an influx to buy this set of computers this time, because computers break, Chromebooks lose keys, screens crack, all kinds of things. And so we need to find new sources of fundings. Most educators believe that we need more funding for technology, but I am of the opinion, with some other critics that I found, that there's too much unused technology in school buildings. Every teacher in my building has something called a AirPad. And so what that does is it controls your smartboard from anywhere in the room. 2 out of the 25 teachers that we have use them. So we spent all of this money on this technology, but we didn't utilize it, and that could have gone somewhere else. So we need to make sure that we're investing in technology that's going to be utilized. One more recommendation was that we need to define and promote the rules of multiple stakeholders. So who are stakeholders in education? Well, not only is it the government, but it's also the private sector and the schools themselves, and parents and families and teachers and students. Even students need to be promoted as having a stake in their own education. They need to be advocates for their own education. So the state and local government should make sure they're integrating technology into their standards. Make sure that your standards are not just, can you do these 10 grammatical things, but can you write an email properly? Can you write a letter properly? Those kinds of things. And then parents and families should be willing to support schools, not only with the integration of technology and embracing that, but also to provide additional funding if it's necessary. And then I found another article that administrators are woefully uninvolved in policymaking, and we're allowing people who've never been in the classroom to make these decisions for us. And administrators need to become more involved. We saw that in this last election in Oklahoma, where uh, we elected a bunch of teachers and administrators into the Senate and the House because we were tired of people making decisions for education who had no idea how an actual classroom runs. So it's not just about running for office, but talking and becoming more involved in that process of policymaking. Finally, we need to make sure that research, evaluation, and assessments are increased and diversified. So we have enough research that says technology provides benefits. We have that research, but now we need to create new educationally relevant technologies, create new forms of educational software, create new pedagogy that integrates education and technology, and then research which of these technologies are the most effective. And they recommended in 2003 that 1 to 5% of all educational funding should be spent on research. Research is extremely important. It provides that data that you can show to the public that says, listen, this is working, so let's continue to fund it. We also need to update regulations. Technology is changing all the time, and we need to make sure that we keep our regulations up to date. We need to protect online learners from their privacy to security. We need to protect them from predators and bullies. And with the ever-changing face of social media, we need to make sure that we're keeping our students safe, not only physically, but mentally. And then we need to educate educators about their roles in technology, copyright infringement, digitizing their content and having it stolen, FERPA violations. We need to make sure that we're educating them and protecting them from these lawsuits and terrible things that could potentially happen to them. So finally, I want to leave you with this quote, two quotes. First, great technology cannot replace poor teaching. So no matter how much technology we pour into the classroom, if you have a poor teacher, it's not going to increase test scores. But with great technology and great teaching, we can do great things. And then there's this quote from John Steinbeck. It says, I have come to believe that a great teacher is a great artist. Teaching might even be the greatest of the arts since the medium is the human mind and spirit. Since we are teachers and we are educators, we have a great responsibility to not only produce the greatest art that we can, but also to have respect for the medium that we use. These are my resources. The DOE retrospective, a first look in educational technology from 2008. I used some National Center for Education Statistics website, and then also a educators consortium, basically, about computers and learning and making the connection. So thanks for watching. I've included underneath this presentation a Google form. If you wouldn't mind filling it out, that would be great. Thank you and have a great day.